Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah Sruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krudau Vande Bhagavanto Punah Punaha. So I hope today we will conclude this Anandamaya Thiranam. So before we come to the last part of this Bhashyam, just give a short synopsis of what we already discussed till now. In the traditional text, there is a summary of the dialectical, the multi-layered arguments in this Sutra Bhashyam. That is Anandamayeha Paramatma Kudaha Abhyasat. It is the first stage in this dialectical exchange. Some of the early interpreters, exponents argued that Anandamaya implies Jiva or Pradhanam, which is Achetanam. So that is refuted by a pre-Shankarite Vedantin who is not strictly an Advaitin but stands somewhere between Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita and Advaita proper, Shankara's Kevala Advaita. So it is sometimes called technical Ekadeshi Madam, because it bears some similarities with Advaita, but it also, maybe it could be called much closer to Visishta Advaita in its ontological conclusions. For example, it thinks of Ishvara as an Upasya, which is called Paramatma. So Anandamaya Paramatma, this is their view. Anandamaya here implies Paramatma. Paramatma in Ekadeshi Madam implies not the Atman, Brahman of Advaitins, but Ishvara or Saguna, Sopadhiga Brahman or Saguna Ishvara. Kutaka Abhyasat, because it is repeated again and again. Abhyasa is one of the Shadvidha lingas, Upakrama Upasamkhara, Abhyasa Apurvata Phalam, Arthavadha Upapatija, Lingam Talpere Nirnaya. This is Shadvidha lingam. So Abhyasa is very important. So it is being repeated again and again in this particular Upanishad Vakya from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Saisha Anandasya Mimamsa Bhavati Edam Anandamana Upasankramadi Ityadina Anandamayaha Abhyasyati. This is the argument. So there are many such Upanishad mantras where the word Ananda or Anandamaya is repeated. Again, you'll find later that actually Anandamaya is not repeated, Ananda is repeated. So that is the important hermeneutic twist that comes at the end of the conclusion of the Bhashya structure, which is put forward by Shankaracharya. Abhyasascha Tatparilingam. Tatparyam cha Vedantanam Brahmani eva Tatparyam. Iti avochama. So Shadvidha Tatparya Linga is mentioned here. So Abhyasa is very important. Kimcha Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma idi Brahma Upakramad idam Sarvam Asrijada idi Sarva Srishtutvadibhyascha Anandamayaha Brahma. So Upakrama Upasamkhara. Upakrama is the beginning, the opening, the introduction, what it begins with. Upakrama. Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma, that is the Prakrita, the context in the entire discussion or dialectical exchange between Jiva Paksha and also Ekadeshi Madam, that is Vrittigara Madam, which refutes Jiva Paksha. but the view that Jiva or Achetanam, Pradhanam, is the actual implication of Anandamaya. Nacha Brahmani Mayat Shabda Anubhuti. So Mayat Pratyaya is an important subject of discussion here, Mayat Pratyaya. So Mayat Pratyaya is interpreted in Vigara Arthat, that is, Vigara means modification, a valute, a product, an effect. So Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya. All these are different evolutes, vikaras, modifications of Ananda according to the Purvapaksha. Purvapaksha here argues that Anandamaya implies Jiva or Pradhanam, and that view is being refuted by Vrittikara Matam. Vrittikara, technically we do not know who it was. So it is still being debated among scholars who this Vrittikara was. According to the majority of scholars, the common view is Vrittikara here is a reference to Bodhayana. Bodhayana wrote his commentary on that's Kritakodi, which is not available today in its full form. It is said that Ramanuja procured a copy of this from Kashmir, and that was the work on which Ramanuja based. Ramanuja wrote a Bhashyam on Brahma Sutras, following the footsteps of the views of Vrittikara. Most probably Bodhayana. If it is Kritakodi, it should be Bodhayana. But there are views, there are scholars who argue that it may be Upavarsha also. Another pre-Shankarite Vedanti. So, Kimcha Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma Idi Brahma Upakramad Idam Sarvam Asrijada Idi Sarva Srishtutvyadibhyascha Anandamaya Brahma. So, Idam Sarvam Asrijada. That is how it concludes, the Prakarana concludes. Nacha Brahmani Maya Shabda Anubhavatihi. So, Maya Shabda as it can be added, suffix can be added to all these different koshas. So, here one should understand very what is the meaning of kosha. So, Anandamaya kosha is the fifth one. Before that, there is Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya. Kosha could mean the identity, the thing with which we identify ourselves. The outermost is Annamaya, the innermost is Anandamaya. So, in our evolution, in spiritual life, we may identify ourselves with the physical body, a person who is very gross in his ideas and understanding of life as a whole, or at a higher level, Pranamaya, at a still higher level, Manomaya, at a still higher level, Vijnanamaya, and highest of the Kosha dimension, Panchakosha, is Anandamaya. So, Prajuryarthatus Sambhavad. So, Maya Nacha Brahmani, Prajuryartha to Sambhavad. Prajuryartha, Vikarartha. Two ways of interpreting Mayat Pratyaya. Prajurya means prajurada, abundance, a huge quantity. So the idea is, according to Vrittikara, Anandamaya means abundance of a huge quantity of Ananda or bliss. And that comes very close to the Ramanuji's or Ramanuja's interpretation of Ishvara, who is an embodiment, or he is a repository of all auspicious qualities, Sagala Guna Kalyana Nidhi. So the Bhashya will tell you at some point, you pray to a Saguna Sakara Ishvara, who is himself is an embodiment of, who possesses all Aishwarya, all Bhagas, Jnanam, Aishwaryam, Vairagyam, all these. exist in abundance in this Saguna Sakara Ishvara. So you pray to him for little Aishwarya. It's fine. You get it. The Bhashyakara will tell you, very rich man, very, very rich, super rich person. He has so much of money. So if you ask for $1,000, he'll have no problem to giving you. So if Ishvara has got all the huge Aishwarya, then you can ask Ishvara to pray a little bit of that. So Ishvara here becomes Upasya. So when Brahman is interpreted as Upasya, then that Upasya is Anandamaya of Vrittikara. Very similar to Ramanuja's views of Ishvara. So Prajuryarthattu Sambhavad Prayadi Avayava api Vishyadarsanadi Ubadhikrita Bhavishyanti. So, you can find in the Taittiriya mantra, which we quoted many times, Modo, Dakshina Paksha, Pramodo, Uttara Paksha, etc. All you find in this Priyameva Shiraha, all that you find. Of the Anandamaya, this Shira is Priya, is what he likes, Moda, enjoyment, hilarity, like that. All these are different, all these Uttara Paksha, Dakshina Paksha, all that are mentioned here. The imagery of a bird. And then finally comes Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha. That is the Adhikarana Vakyam or Vishaya Vakyam of this Adhikarana, which I already explained once. Tasmad Paramatma Anandamaya iti Ekadeshina Matam. So this is the conclusion of this analysis. This is not Advaita, but Ekadeshi means somebody who is in some ways come close to Advaita, but not actually Advaita. So this is Ekadeshi Matam, Ekadeshina Matam. Now, what Bhashyakara does is, he goes beyond this and he considers Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha as the Siddhanta, as the Adhikarana Vakyam of this Adhikarana. Why? Because Adhikarana Vakyam should have a reference to Upakrama. Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma. So Brahman is clearly stated in this Upakrama. Upasamhara should also state that Shabda, Brahma Shabda. So, Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha, that should be the conclusion. Pradishtha here means Asraya, Adhisthana, that is Bhashyam. A bird flying in the sky. It is supported by its tail. So the name the tail of Bhashyam doesn't really mean the tail. So Bhashyakara will tell you that it is Gauna. Gauna means something in terms of characteristics or properties of something. So you call a person which is tiger, which means he may have some of the characteristics of a tiger, strong and brave and fast and things like that. But the person who may call his friend is tiger among men, he knows he's not a tiger. But still, the man possesses some of the gunas or characteristics of the tiger. In a secondary sense, he may be called a tiger. So it's like that, the word Bhashyam is only Gaunartha. It's not a tail, but it is only in a secondary sense. And also because in the same context, when other koshas are mentioned, it's already mentioned in the Upanishad, Avayavas are mentioned. Priyameva Shiraha, Modo Dakshina Paksha, Pramodo Uttara Paksha, all these are mentioned. These are Avayavas, different parts. Shira means head. Priyameva Shiraha, like that defined. So, according to Advaita, the central statement in the entire Prakritam context is Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha, and Bhashyakara, in his attempt to establish that, he says Anandamaya itself is to be transcended. Anandamaya is not Brahman, but Brahman is something that transcends Anandamaya. And when it transcends Anandamaya, you reach the Adhishthanam, the Asraya, the Pradhishtha of the Anandamaya, and that is Pucham. So it is not Anandamayasya Pucham, it is Anandamayasya Pradhishtha. That's the meaning of Brahma Pucham Pradhishtha. So this much only as an introduction. Now, a few things about this multi-layered arguments. So first we should remember the Tatparyam of the central theme is Brahma Pucham Pradhishtha. And what is the Vishaya? So all Adhikaranas are Vishaya or Samshaya, Purvapaksha, Uttarapaksha, Siddhanta. These are Panchavayavas of an Adhikarana. Vishaya is this Taittiriya statement. Tasmat edasmat vijnanamayat anyondar atma anandamaya. This is Vishaya. The next is Samshaya or Vishaya. That is, what is the and who is this Anandamaya? What is this Anandamaya? Whether it is Brahman, Jiva, Pradhanam, whether even is Brahman, it is Sopadhika, Nirupadhika. These are all different layers of argument. In this context, those who argue, the beginning, Purvapakshin argue that these koshas, including Anandamaya, is Vikarartha. So all these are different Vikaras, evolutes of Ananda. Not only that, it has got many avayavas, parts. Tasya priyameva shiraha modo dekshina paksa pramodoksa. So the different avayavas are, different parts are mentioned here in all these koshas. This is the view of the school that tries to argue that Anandamaya is a Vikara, it is Jiva. But Vrittikara says no, it is not Vikara. So how does he establish his thesis? He says, Mayat Pratyaya should not be interpreted in Vikarartha, especially when it comes to Anandamaya. Vikarartha is perfectly okay in Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya. But in the context of Anandamaya, the Mayat Pratyaya of Anandamaya, because there is a Pradipadika and also a Pratyaya. So Mayat Pratyaya of Anandamaya should be interpreted not in Vikarartha as in other four koshas like Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, but Mayat Pratyaya should be interpreted in Prachuryartham, abundance, in the context of Anandamaya. This is the argument of Vrittikara. And what is his argument? He says, he takes a counter position. He says, because Anandamaya is repeated, Anandamaya Abhyasa is there. Anandamaya Abhyasa, that is the sutra itself. But you have to remember, Bhashyakara will later tell you that Anandamaya is not repeated, Ananda is repeated. And that Ananda is Brahman. That's the idea behind. So what is the justification for Vrittikara for this Vikarartha Parityagaha, as we call it in scholarly argument? The argument is that after Anandamaya is mentioned, Anyondara, like that is not mentioned. Nothing is mentioned which is innermost of Anandamaya. So you have to remember in the early statement, Tasmat edasmat vijnanamayat anyondara atma is mentioned. So Anandamaya is anyaha antara. I mean it is distinct and it is innermost of Vijnanamaya. But nothing is mentioned which is innermost of Anandamaya. So that is one argument for saying that Anandamaya is Paramatma. That is again the view of Vrittigara Matam. So you find in the Bhashyam there's a very long discussion, different layers of arguments. So Vigarartha Varityaga is justified in the context that there is nothing mentioned which is innermost of Anandamaya. Secondly, Vrittigara stops with Saguna, Sakara, Savishesha, Savayava, Anandamaya. Because Savayavatvam and Sagunatvam, all these characteristics are applicable for Anandamaya. Why? Because Tasya Priyameva Siddha, Modo Dakshina Pakshaka, Brahmaduttara Pakshaka. So Avayavatvam is mentioned and bliss is also mentioned as a characteristic of Anandamaya. Similarly, Ramanuja's Vishuddha is very similar. Ishvara, Ramanuja, Saguna Sakara, Ishvara has got all these Sagala Guna, Kalyana, Nidhi, all the auspicious qualities, all the bhagas. Aishwaryasya, Velam, Aishwaryam, Viryam, Teja, Jnanam, Vairagyam, all these are mentioned as the characteristics of Saguna Sakara Ishvara. So, that is a similarity. Now, one question arises. In this particular Bhashya, Bhashyakara, as I mentioned earlier, he doesn't stop with Anandamaya Kosha. Vrittigara stops there. Vrittigara Madam Bhashyam, it ends with establishing Anandamaya as Paramatma. But Bhashyakara goes beyond that. And he pushes further and he says, there is Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha. But Bhashyakara, Shankaracharya, is not willing to agree with the Vrittigara's hermeneutical twist of interpreting Maya Pratyaya in Vigarartha up to Vijnanamaya Kosha, and then when it comes to Anandamaya Kosha, to interpret the same Maya Pratyaya in Prajuryartham. So he says there is a discrepancy, there is a mismatch. Ardha Jaritiya Nyaya. So person is very old, one half the body, the other half is very young. So it's a contradiction, it is impossible. You cannot interpret Pratyaya in one way in Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and then in a totally different way in Anandamaya. It is impossible. That's the hermeneutical twist. So Bhashyakara says Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma is Upakrama. Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha is the Nigamana Siddhanta Vagya conclusion. Now how does it? He says through Lakshana, I mean when you think of the Paramartha Tattvam, then you have to establish that this Paramartha Tattvam as Brahman does not have any properties, characteristics, and again it is not an Upasya, it is a Jnaya, I mentioned this earlier. Upasya Saguna Sagara Savishesha Sobadhika. Jnaya Nirguna Nirubadhika Nirakara. So, when you are doing Upasana for a Saguna Sagara Ishvara, there is karma involved, rituals involved. Which means you have to go beyond that, you have to continue your spiritual journey. So Bhashyakara says, Bhashyakara doesn't say in this context, but elsewhere he stated, it is Adhigari Bheda. If a person wants to pray to Ishvara, as Vrittigara depicts him as a Sobadhika, Upasya, perfectly okay, but that does not bring moksha or mukti. It may bring all other qualities. Saguna, Sagara, Savishesha, Sadhana, spiritual practices will certainly help you eventually to go beyond itself. But at the same time, it itself doesn't bring ultimate moksha. So jnanat eva moksha, that is Advaita's view. So Advaita doesn't say that Upasya dimension is wrong, but he says Upasya should be transcended. So these are, in short, in other ways, what do you say, Purvapaksha, begins interpretation, that is Jiva, Pradhanam, etc. Vrittikara comes, refutes that view. He tries to establish that Pradhanam, Jiva cannot be the actual implication of Anandamaya. Anandamaya should be Paramatma, Ishvara. So, in the Anandamaya context, in the fifth kosha, we have to change the interpretation of Maya Pratyaya. Maya Pratyaya should be interpreted as Prajudi Artha. But the same Pratyaya can be interpreted in Vigara Artha in the context of Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, etc. So Bhashyakara establishes the Brahma Bhashyam Pradishtha. Here it means, in the last part of the Bhashya, Bhashyakara takes pains to establish another very important point. Why the Pucham is mentioned. And this is a very important point to understand. Could be misunderstood. Pucham, Puchavat, Pucha means, in other four koshas, there are references to different avayavas, parts of the body, Uttara Paksha, Dakshina Paksha, etc., and characteristics. So, in the context of including this mantra in the Taittiriya, in a Gauna sense, the word Pucham is used, but that's only Gaunartha, not Mukhyartha. Like Pucham means the Brahman is the Pucham of Anandamaya. Brahman is the support, Pradishtha. Nirakara, Nirguna, Nirvishesha is always the support of Saguna Sakara. Because you transcend Saguna Sakara, then you reach Nirguna Nirakara. That is Brahma Ucham Pradishtha. Now we will come to the text. I think we have to begin with the Apicha Ananda Prajara Ityukte Dukkhastitvam Abhigamyate. Prajuryasya loke Prayogi Alpatva Apekshatvat. That is a statement. So, Apicha Ananda Prajara Ityukte. Suppose, so Bhashyakara here is trying to find out some of the serious problems of Vrittikara Matam. Vrittikara Matam says that Anandamaya is Saguna Sagara Savishesha. So he is trying to correct some of the views, bring out additional light into the system. He says, Apicha Ananda Prajara Ityukte. Suppose you say Ishvara is Ananda Prajara. Means it's an abundance of Ananda. Then it always implies, as I mentioned in the last class, just did not take the text, but I mentioned in some other context, when you say a man is very rich, it doesn't mean that he is the richest in the world. Even if he is the richest in the world, he may not be able to do everything possible. So to that extent, that what he cannot do with his money, he is poor. In other words, there is always this, this comparative degree. The richest also may find somebody who is even richer. So compared to the one who is richer than him, he is poor. The prachuryam always implies a kind of comparison. It is not perfect. He has a lot of money more than you, but there will be people who are even richer than him. So that's why dukkha abhi gamyade. I mean, there is a small little fraction of dukkha. Prajuryasya loke prayogya alpatva apekshatvad. Actually, you don't call a person very rich unless there is somebody who is not so very rich. You don't call a person very strong unless there is somebody who is not as strong as him. You don't call a person very tall unless there is somebody who is not as tall as him. So, prachurata itself implies some limitation. And Brahman cannot have any such limitation. You have to remember here, Vrittigara is not willing to accept the idea of a Nirguna, Niragara, Nirvishesha, Brahman, that respect. Because Vrittigara Madam, Vrittigara's philosophy, Bodhayana's philosophy did not reach that level of sophistication or philosophical focus, ontological focus. So Bhashyakara, he is trying to establish Advaita Siddhanta based on the Taittiriya mantras by pointing out different systems of philosophy, beginning with the grossest Jiva Paksha, Pradhana Paksha, and then moving forward, coming to Vrittigara, and then when Vrittigara himself presents a very highly sophisticated system of philosophy, then Bhashyakara gives a minor correction, then becomes Advaita. So that is the structure. So the ultimate focus is to establish Advaita Siddhanta. If he makes a statement, people won't understand. So he is carefully analyzing different layers of argument. That's why Apicha Ananda Prajira Ityukte, mean Anandamaya Ananda Prajaraha Ityukte, Dukkhastittvam Abhigamyate. There will be some little bit of Dukkhalpatvam or Dukkha Pratiti. By Prajuryasya Pradyogi Alpatva Apekshatvad. You don't call a person very rich unless there is somebody who is less rich than him. Now, that means if Ishvara of Vrittigara is Ananda Prajura, is an abundance of bliss, there should be some dukkha. Now, Ramanuja, post-Ramanujite philosophers of Vishtadvaita tradition, they have tried to answer this argument. They will tell you that, referring to the Advaitin's argument, that if you take Maya Pratyaya in Prajuryartham, then some kind of, at least some Dukkha Praditi is unavoidable. And then if you say Ishvara is a Dukkha, then it makes him less than Ishvara. It's not Brahman. It has a limitation. So that problem has to be solved. So Ramanuja philosophy, they tell you that Dukkha Alpatvam is not there, only Dukkha Praditi is there. Ishvara is called Ananda Prajura, and it doesn't mean that Ishvara has got Dukkha Alpatvam, a little bit of, along with lot of bliss, little bit of Dukkha. Now that is the argument of Advaitins. In answer to this, Ramanuja is, no Ramanuja, but Ramanuja's followers will argue, Ishvara doesn't have any Dukkha Alpatvam, only Dukkha Alpatva Praditi. Similarly, in Advaita Vedanta, a Jivan Mukta. What is the difference between Jivan Mukta and ordinary Jiva? For an ordinary Jiva, Dukkha is really a big disaster. It's a big, terrible tragedy. It will shock him, it will shatter him. But Jivan Mukta also may have to go through many difficult situations. But it's only Dukkha Pratiti, not real Dukkha. But the reason is different because he's always identified with Brahman, which is beyond Sukha Dukkha equation, Dvandva Atita. So even for a Jivan Mukta, he is not living in a state of bliss. What we call the bliss of a Jivan Mukta is not the bliss of Anandamaya. It is a bliss that goes beyond both Dukkha and Sukha both. It is transcend both bliss and also its opposite. But in Vrittigara Madam, Ishvara has got lot of bliss. It doesn't say that Ishvara transcends but bliss and its opposite, not Dvandva Atita. So Jivan Mukta in Advaita is also experiencing dukkha pratiti, not dukkha. He may have a physical problem, but body is mithya. He's not worried about it. He may lose money, but he doesn't care because the money itself is mithya for him. It's not something that really matters. So it doesn't affect him. So there is no dukkhalpata praditi for a Jivan Mukta, but there is dukkhalpata praditi for a Ishvara as depicted by Ramanujites and also by Vrittikara Madam. That's the argument here. Tathacha sadi yatra nanyat pashyati nanyat sunodi nanyat vijanadi sabhuma idi bhumini brahmani tad vedrikta abhava sutihi uparuddhyeda. Now if you depict a God or Ishvara who has got a little bit of dukkha pratiti or dukkha alpatvam, then that Ishvara doesn't justify the Sruti statement. What is the Sruti statement? Yatra nanyat sunodi, nanyat pashyati, nanyat sunodi, nanyat vijanadi sabhuma. The one who goes beyond all, he doesn't see anyone, he doesn't hear anything else, he doesn't hear anyone else, he doesn't see anything else, anyone else, he is sabhuma. He is the infinite. So that is the nature of Brahman, and that is also the nature of Brahmajnani, according to Advaita. So Vrittikara Madam collapses because, according to him, there is always some kind of dukkhalpatvam or dukkhalpatva pratiti, if you take Ramanuja's view. That's the argument. And that will go diametrically opposite to the Sruti statement, yatra nanyat pashyati nanyat sunodi nanyat vijanadi chandogya, etc. Idi bhumani brahmani tad vidrikta abhava sutihi. So there is nothing in this world other than itself, that total unity and oneness that Bhuma Vidya is taught in Chandogya. That Sruti statement will fall to the ground if you take this view. So Bhashyakara says that cannot be accepted. There is no dukkhalpatvam. So you cannot even call Anandamaya, which you call Brahman, as Ananda Prajura. That means Bhashyakara will come to the statement. Another argument. Pradishariram cha priyadi bheda anandamayasyavi bhinnatvam. So, ubadhi bheda, ubadhi always means difference for each sharira. Priyamodadhigam and then priyashiraskatvam. I mean, tasya priyameva shiraha. And then modu dakshina paksha, pramodu uttara paksha. These are all the characteristics of Ananda. Anandamaya. That will be different among different people. So the Paramatma existing all human bodies, they had the same level, same degree of moda, pramoda, etc. So padishariram bhinnatvam. Each body, each individual jiva is different from each other individual jiva when it comes to priya, moda, etc. Pradishariram cha priyadi bheda anandamayasyabi bhinnatvam. Brahmatu na pradishariram vidyati. Brahman cannot be different. The same Brahman exists as Brahman. The manifestation of Brahman in each individual sarira may depend upon the antakarana, samskaras and so on. But Atma of Brahman itself manifesting in different individuals, it doesn't change. It remains the same. The way it manifests apparently may be different, but itself remains the same. But in the context of Vrittikara Madam, Anandamaya itself possesses some inseparable qualities and characteristics which are again different from Sharira to Sharira. So that will contradict the spirit of the statement that we recorded just now from Chandogya. Yatra nanya pashyati nanya sunodi nanya vijanadi sabhuma, etc. Bhuma Vidya mentioned here. Pradishariram cha priyadi bheda anandamayasyabi bhinnatvam. Brahma tu na pradishariram vidyati. Brahman remains the same. There is no difference. Pradishariram pradijivam. It means each jiva is sharira, different. It's not there. Why Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma iti Anandya Sutehi. So already created here Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma. Taittiriya again. The Suti statement is there. It is the same. It is the infinite everywhere. The same. Eko Deva Sarvabhudeshu Gudha Sarvavyapi Sarvabhudantaratma. Shveda Sudara. It is just Sutyantara. These are all different Suti statements. So maybe I need not explain to you every Upanishad statement that is being quoted here. So when you again listen to this, when you study, make serious effort, then you can refer to the Upanishad statements. But if I again repeat again the translation of different Upanishad statements, that may unnecessarily prolong the program. So I want to concentrate on the Brahma Sutra itself, Bhashya itself, which you are not familiar with. Okay, so no question. Another important argument is put forward here. So, iti ananda sudeki eko deva sarvabhudeshu gudha sarvavyapi sarvabhudantaratma. Second argument is, that is implied in the Tigas, he says, priyam moda, all these are empirical things. Then they are bound to be different. So you cannot say that something like Anandamaya, which has got all these characteristics and qualities, in Brahman you cannot say that, because the manifestation of the Anandamaya could be different from one Sharira to another Sharira. It will be different. And that doesn't agree with the fundamental principle that the Brahman is infinite, because you cannot say that Anandamaya is Brahman. So again you have to remember, Pratikara says Anandamaya is Paramatma. And Paramatma, the word he uses Paramatma in the sense of what we understand as Saguna, Sagara, Sabhisesha, Sobhadhika Brahman. But Pratikara himself doesn't articulate anything about something that transcends all the upadhis. For the Smritigara is concerned, the ultimate reality is the Paramatma. Bhashyagara says, Shankaracharya says, no, ultimate reality is something that includes this, but goes beyond all this, to transcends. So that is Asraya, support of this Anandamaya. Again, Nacha Anandamayasya Abhyasa Suyate. So Anandamaya is not repeated. So Anandamaya Abhyasa na Suyate. Na Suyate means not found in Sudhis, in scriptures, in books, that's a meaning. Na Suyate. Na Sravana means not found in any Sudhi statements. Nacha Anandamayasya Abhyasa Suyate. Then Pradipadigartham eva he sarvatra abhyasati raso vaisaga rasakevayam libdhanandi bhavati, etc. The point is, Anandamaya is not repeated, but only Ananda is repeated. That Ananda is Brahman, perfectly okay, no problem. Raso vaisaga rasakevayam libdhanandi bhavati, etc. That's true. But that rasa, that Ananda is not the same as Anandamaya. It goes beyond Anandamaya. It is Brahman itself. So what is it? So the point is, Nacha Anandamayasya Abhyasa Suyade Pradipadigarthamatramevahi Sarvatra Abhyasade. Pradipadiga, that is synonym, the substantive portion of the phrase. Well, that is only Ananda is repeated. Anandamaya is not repeated. Pradipad means Paripadam Granadi Tat Pradipatikam. That's the real meaning. The original form of the word, Ananda. Without adding Mayat Pratyaya. So that is Pradipatikam. Pradipadam Granadi Tat Pradipatikam. That is the Vritti here. So Rasovai Saga Rasakevayam Libdo Anandi Bhavadi, etc. Koheva Anyat Kapranad Yadesha Agash Anando Nasya Saisha Anandasya Mimamsa Bhavadi Anandam Brahmana Vidvarna Vibhedi Kutaschana, etc. Anando Brahmedi Vyajanat Idicha. So these are all Taittiriya statements which most of you have studied. And there are those who is not studied, we can refer to the book, no problem. Okay. So if I translate and explain every single Upanishad quotation, that may take a lot of time, and we may lose that much time for explaining the Bhashya technical details. Okay. Yadi cha anandamaya shabdasya brahma vishetum nischidam bhaved tada uttareshu anandamatra prayogeshu bhi anandamaya abhyasa kalpyeda nadu anandamaya brahmattum asti. So this is an important argument. So, and one important argument is this: those who know Brahmanandam, he will transcend all fear. That is a very important thing. Anandam Brahmano Vidvarna Bibhedi Kutaschana. And also the Bhrigavalli, Ananda Bhimedi Vyajanad, etc. So, another argument is, if the meaning of Ananda is Brahman, then wherever there is Ananda used, then immediately you can understand it is Ananda, not Anandamaya. But Anandamaya is not used, only Ananda is used. And that Ananda is Brahman, not Anandamaya. When you bring Mayat Pratyaya, then you have to bring Vikarartha or Prajulyartha. And that is justifiable only in the context of something that is finite, that is not infinite. Because Maya Pratyaya cannot be used unless you imply that it is the evolute or a manifestation of Ananda, or that Maya Pratyaya should imply there is a prajurada, huge quantity or abundance of Ananda. In both cases, it becomes less than infinite. But if you use the Ananda itself, it becomes Ananda Swarupa, Ananda itself, without a pratyaya. So that is the argument here. So Anandamaya is not repeated. Abhyasa is only for Ananda Shabda, not Anandamaya Shabda. Yadicha Anandamaya Shabdasya Brahma Vishayattum Nischidam Bhaved Tataha Uttareshu Anandamatra Prayeshu Abhi Anandamaya Abhyasa Kalpyeda. Which means, if the phrase Anandamaya actually meant Brahman, or if the expression Anandamaya were definitely ascertained to mean Brahman, then the abhyasa, that is repetition of the word Anandamaya, even in later or subsequent uses of that particular word Ananda, alone would have been seen. But you don't find that happening. But that is not the case. So it's a very important point to keep in mind. That is, Anandamaya, if it actually meant Brahman, then the abhyasa of the word Anandamaya, even in later uses, subsequent uses of the word Ananda alone would have been seen. But you don't find that happening. So again, another point is the Natu Anandamayasya Brahmattum Asti Priya Shirastwadibhi Hetubhi Idi Avochama. So we already mentioned here, Shira is Priya. Priyameva Shiraga. These are all different statements, and that shows that Anandamaya is not Brahman. Nadu Anandamayasya Brahmattum Asti. Priyashirastwadibhir hedubhi iti avachama tasmad sutyantare. Another Shruti statement, Vijnanam Anandam Brahma iti Ananda Pradipadigasya Brahmani Prayoga Darshanad. Now, here another point is there. There is another Shruti statement. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. These words are used to imply Brahman. There, the same Ananda used. But then this Ananda is not anywhere. Therefore, in this context, because it occurs in the context of a succession of similar statements. So that is the argument that should be understood very carefully. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma iti Ananda Pradipadigasya Brahmani Prayoga Darshanad Yadesha Akasha Anando Nasya Ityadhi Brahma Vishaya Prayogu Natu Anandamaya Abhyasa iti Gantavyam. So here also Ananda is repeated, not Anandamaya. And the reason is given here, Yastu Ayam Mayrandasyeva Ananda Sabdasya Abhyasaka. Because the point is, Ananda Padasya Abhyasaka and Brahma Padasya Abhyasaka are the same. Because there is no Abhyasa of Anandamaya Shabda. In an earlier context, it comes as a part of the same statement. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma iti Ananda Padipadesya Brahmani Prayoga Darsha Yadesha Agasha Anando Nasyad, etc. So, this Anandamaya is repeated, but when Anandamaya is repeated, it is always the reference to Paramatma Ishvara. When Ananda is repeated, it always implies the Brahman, that is without pratyaya, without Maya pratyaya. Vijnanam and Anandam are Brahman is already used here. Another very important point, in earlier context, there is a statement which I come to you later. Yastu ayam mayadanta seva ananda sabdasya abhyasaka. So, mayat pratyaya. So, wherever you find this particular statement, I will come to that. Mayat pratyayanta. What is Mayat pratyayanta? Is Ananda pada. That is Ananda Maya. There is no repetition, there is no abhyasa there. Because this Anandamaya Atma should be realized. That statement. Yastu ayam mayadanda seva anasabdasya abhyasaka edam anandamayam atmanam upasankramati iti natasya brahma vishettum asti edam anandamayam atmanam upasankramati. So, in the earlier context, here it could mean prapnodi, but here it doesn't mean prapnodi. Upasankramati means not prapnodi in this context, but tyajadi and going beyond. That's the meaning. And here you have to understand, in the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, etc., each further progression implies something that is leaving behind and going beyond that. It is not prapnodi, but it is tyajati. To reach Vijnanamaya, you have to transcend, going beyond, giving up Manomaya. To attain Manomaya, you have to go beyond, you have to give up Pranamaya. To attain Pranamaya, you have to give up Annamaya. So, each progression involves some kind of a tyaga and transcendence. That is, giving up and transcending. You cannot reach Vijnanamaya without giving up Manomaya and transcending Manomaya. You cannot reach Manomaya without giving up and transcending Pranamaya. So, normally, this Upasankramadi may mean Prapnodi, but not in this context. That is the idea behind. So, Maya Pratyaya and the Anandapada, that is Anandamaya Shabda, this repetition is not there. This question may arise. That question was raised. So, Bhashyakara says, it's not a word that implies Brahman. Why? So, Yastu ayam mayadandasya ananda sabdasya abhyasaka. There is no repetition, there is no avarti, there is no abhyasa of mayadandasya, anandamaya shabda. And there is a given quotation, the edam anandamayam atmanam upasankramadi. Anandamayam atmanam upasankramadi means going beyond Anandamaya, giving up Anandamaya and attaining something transcendental. Na tasya Brahma Vishayatvam asti. So that means Anandamaya has to be transcended. You should go beyond Anandamaya. If Anandamaya is something that is to be transcended, then the Anandamaya cannot be Brahman. That's the idea behind it. Why this statement comes here? Because the Upanishad statement is there, you remember? Idish Anand, Akash Anandonasya, again, Edam Anandamayam Atmanam Upasankramati. Edam Anandamayam Atmanam Upasankramati. This Anandamaya, which is Atman, that should be attained. This is a natural meaning one may attribute. Bhashyakara said no. Why? Prapnodi is the natural meaning. Why here that meaning should not be accepted? Prapnodi means you become one with it. Prapnodi means you become one with it. But in the entire text, there is a statement. Edam Annamayam Atmanam Upasankramadi, Pranamayam Atma Upasankramadi, Manomayam, then Vijnanamaya. So in each of these contexts, if it is a Prapnodi, then there cannot be any further progression. But from Annamaya you go to Pranamaya. You go to Manomaya, you go to Vijnanamaya, then to Anandamaya. So Prapnodi Artha cannot be taken. If you take Prapnodi Artha, then you, after reaching Annamayam Atmanam Upasankramadi, then there is no further beyond that. No further progress. But Upanishad says, Edam Annamayam Atmanam Upasankramadi, Pranamayam, Manomayam, Vijnanamayam Upasankramadi. This Upasankramana means here means not Prapnodi. So the meaning is not arbitrarily, unilaterally brought here. The meaning should be interpreted based on the context. Meaning should not be taken from dictionary. When you take a meaning from dictionary, it should be agreeable to the context. That is an ancient rule in Vaidika Vyakarana, in Shankara's Vyakarana, of course, Durgacharya's commentary on the Niruktam you find, Edasya Arthasya Anyena Bhavidavyam, Pravaktuhu Vaividhyad, Prakarana Vaividhyad. So Pravakta means somebody who uses that word, and Prakarana Vaidya means Prakarana means Prakruta, context, the particular context where the word is used. Based on that, Asya Arthasya Anyena Bhavidavya means the meaning of this word could be different based on the person who uses it and the context in which the word is used. So here, Upasankramadi, the word comes in this context of the gradual evolution, progression from Annamaya up to Vijnanamaya and then to Anandamaya. So Prapnoti Artha cannot be taken. Tyajati that artha should be taken. Upasankramati means. That means it gives up the early stage and moves forward. So that's clear to you in doubt, if you doubt in doubt. Natasya brahma vishettum asti. So, if this is something that good that you give up, etam anandamaya matmanam upasankramati means here you give up that. You means you are moving something higher than that. What is the higher? Bhashyakara will tell you it is Brahma Bhashyam Pratishtha. Why? The same Brahman you use, Brahma Shabda used in Upakrama, Satyam, Jnanam, Anandam, Brahma. That Brahma Shabda is not used in Anandamaya Kosha Shabda. It is used in Brahma Bhashyam Pratishtha. So what should be the Siddhanta Vakya, Nigamana Vakya, or what should be the Upasamkhara Vakya? Upasamkhara Vakya means, it be the conclusion, it should be Brahma Bhashyam Pratishtha. It is not an arbitrary arrangement, argument. It comes naturally. Okay, so that's clear to you. Okay. Na tasya Brahma vishettum asti. Vigaratmanameva annamayadinam anatmanam upasankramidanam pravahe padidatvad. What is pravaha? Pravaha padidatvam you already mentioned here. It comes in the flow. Annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, it comes in the flow, anandamaya, fifth one. So there is, again there is that is prakarana vaividhyam is an important factor. I mean, depending on the prakarana, the context, you should give meaning to a word. That is Durgacharya's commentary on Niruktam. That is pravaktuho vaividhyat prakarana vaividhyacha asya arthasya anyena bhavidavyam. So it's a very important. You find in Bhashyakara's argument, you find all these great philosophy means grammatical compared to the philosophy of grammar, great ideas are already incorporated in the commentary system, the commentary method, so to speak. So that's why edam anandamaya atmanam upasamkramati, not prapnoti, but upasamkramati. That's the idea here. Iti nadasya brahma vishetu. Therefore, anandamaya is not Brahman. Anandamaya is not a word that indicates Brahman. Nadasya brahma vishetumadi. Vigaratmanam eva annamayadinam. All these are vigaras of Ananda. Annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, these are all vigaras of Ananda. Even according to Bhattigara. Bhattigara himself admits as a vigara. Only Anandamaya is Prajudyartham. So, vigaratmanam eva annamayadinam anatmanam upasankramitanam pravahe padidatvad. This parampara, pravaha means this continuous one after another, this long succession of parampara. So, therefore, the idea is this, Anandamaya also is a vikara. Bhashyakara will come to that in length. Anandamaya is also a vikara. The prajudyartha that he doesn't accept that. How can you accept it? That's the idea behind. So one point to remember is, Anandamaya Shabda is not repeated, only Ananda Shabda is repeated. Ananda Shabda is repeated, not Anandamaya Shabda. So, Abhyasa principle in the Sadvidhalingam method, it applies only to Ananda Shabda, that Ananda is Brahman, not Anandamaya. Anandamaya is only Vikara of Ananda, including to Advaitins, even Anandamaya is also a Vikara, modification. That's the idea behind. Okay, I think we could not conclude today. Nanu Anandamayasya upasankramidavyasya annamayadivat abhrimatve sati naiva vidusho brahmaprapti phalam nirdishtam bhaved. So, okay, Purvapakshi can argue. If you argue that this Anandamaya also is just like Annamaya, therefore, and is not Brahman, in that case, the one who realizes the Anandamaya, he will not get liberation, he will not get Brahmajnanam, Brahma Prapti. Actually, according to Bhashyam, the Upanishad doesn't say that those who realize Anandamaya will get Brahmajnanam. If you attain Anandamaya, it's just like getting a boon from a god. From Lakshmi you get wealth, from Saraswati you get learning. I like that. You get all these auspicious great things from a concept of Ishvara who has got an abundance, prachuryam of those qualities. Not moksha. Moksha is not one of them. So Purvaksha in a way, sometimes called it's not a very intelligent Purvaksha, but it's the idea that this Purvaksha is projected to emphasize the point once more. Nanu Anandamayasya upasamkramidavyasya Annamayadivat Abbrahmatve sati, if Anandamaya is also is just a Vikara, it's also Brahman, not Brahman, then Vidushka Naiva Brahma Prapti Phalam Nirdishtam Bhavadi. So Bhashyam answer, Naisha Doshaka. This problem doesn't exist. Anandamaya upasamkramana nirdeshenaiva puchyapadishtha bhuda brahma praptehi phalasya nirdishtatvat. Why? Because the reason is puchyam, asrayam. That is Brahman. Brahman is the puchyam asrayam padishtha adhishthanam of Anandamaya. This is the phalam. And this is the result of Anandamaya Prapti. That's what the Upanishad says. So what is the Upanishad say? Upanishad says, so this is the Advaita's argument, you have to remember. So Vrittikara says that through this Prapti, Anandamaya Prapti, Anandamaya Paramatma, Ishvara Saguna Sagara, you get moksha. But Advaita doesn't say, it never says that you get moksha or mukti as a result of grace from a Saguna Sakara Ishvara. A Saguna Sakara Ishvara also can help you to go beyond that stage of and then reach Nirguna Niragara Nirvishesha experience. That's true. Tattvarama Tattwajnanam. That's true. So Saguna Sakara Ishvara can also help you open the doors and opens the door and help you to reach beyond that stage. But it doesn't directly give you moksha. That is Advaita standpoint. So the point is, the idea is this. Anandamaya upasamkramana nirdeshena. What is the Anandamaya upasamkramana? This means by getting realization, by coming to know, by attaining Anandamaya, whenever a phalam is recommended, that phalam is always the phalam, the result that you get as a result of attaining Brahman. Because when you attain Anandamaya, naturally you go beyond that Anandamaya itself and you attain the Pradishtha of Anandamaya. And that Pradishtha Pucham is Brahman. That's the idea behind. So there is a Tadapesha Slogo Bhavadi Yato Vajo Nivartande Ityadina. That's so Ityadina cha Prapanchimanatvat. So Prapanchanam means here a Prapanchanam of not Anandamaya but Prapanchanam of Brahman. That's the idea behind. Yato Vajo Nivartande Aprapi Manasa Saha etc. Where the Upanishad tells you that where you reach, where mind and words cannot reach, mind and words cannot comprehend or define or understand, that should be the prapanchanam, the exposition of Brahman. It is not the exposition of Anandamaya. तदपेश श्लोको भवति यतो वाचो निवर्तन्ते इत्यादिना प्रपञ्चमानत्वात् या तु आनन्दमय सन्निधाने शोकामेद बहुश्यां प्रजायेति इयं श्रुतिः उदाहृता सा ब्रह्मपुच्छं प्रतिष्ठा इति अनेन सन्निहिततरेण ब्रह्मणा सम्बध्यमाना न आनन्दमयस्य ब्रह्मदां प्रतिबोधयति. It's another important argument. You have to use the text to understand this very clearly. So the point is this. Yadu Anandamaya Sannidhane. Whenever there is an expression, that what is the expression? So kamayada bhusyam prajayeti, etc. This Sudhi Vakya. It is of course given as an example. So, and where does it come? It comes very close to Anandamaya Pada, Anandamaya Shabda it comes. That is Sokameda, Bhujampayedi, etc. But then the point is that should be understood in the context of something which is closer to that. What is closer to that? Brahma Bhucham Pradishtha. So the point is Brahma Bhucham Pradishtha is Sannihitatara, means it's closer to this Sokameda Bhucham Prayayidi, this Sudhi Vakya. Closer than Anandamaya. So, in that Sudhivakya comes in the context of Anandamaya Pada. What is Sudhivakya? Sokamayada Bhusyam Prajayedi, etc. But then that Sudhivakya should be interpreted in the context of Brahma Bhucham Pradishtha, which is nearer, which is closer to that Sudhivakya than Anandamaya Pada. Is it clear to you? Prakarana Vaividyad. Prakarana Vaividya means context. These are different ways of interpreting scriptures. So, when you are trying to understand two words, when they are closer together, you have to interpret in that light. Suppose another word is farther away from that word in the same sentence or the same context. Then how do you interpret that word? The word should be interpreted in relation to the word that is nearer to it. Here what is nearer? Sannihida tarena brahmana. Brahma Shabda is nearer to that statement. What is the statement? So kameda bhusyam prajayedi, etc. That is not used in very close to in the context of Anandamaya Shabda, but it is used in the context of Brahmapada. So what does it mean? So kameda bhusyam prajayedi, etc. Iti Brahma iti anena sannihita tarena brahmana sambadhyamana na anandamaya brahmadam pratibodhayati. Therefore, it is not expounding any idea that Anandamaya is Brahman. It is expounding the idea that Brahman is Brahman, because that expression so kameda bhusyam prayadi comes closer to Brahmapada than Anandamaya Pada. It's clear? That's okay. I think, okay, now we're good. Tadapekshitva cha uttarasya grandhasya rasovai saha ityadeki na anandamaya vishayada, therefore rasovai saha, etc. It's already mentioned here, So, then again it comes, rasovai saha. That also should be interpreted as a word referring to, as a phrase referring to Brahman and not referring to Anandamaya. That's the idea behind. Reso, that is Rasa means Ananda, not Anandamaya. Rasa is Ananda. Ananda is Brahman. Anandamaya is only a vigara of Ananda. Or something that contains a huge quantity of Ananda. Then we can mention Ananda Swarupa is always superior to something that has got a lot of Ananda. But that's the idea behind this way. So Brahman is Ananda Swarupa, not Anandamaya. Anandamaya, in Advaita Vedanta, Bhashyakara says it is Vikara. Is it? Just like Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya is also Vikara. An evolute, a manifestation, a modification of Ananda, not Paramatma, as Bhaktikara says. I will conclude now, and I think maybe next day we will conclude this adhiyaranam, and we will take the next adhiyarana, Antaha Tadharmopadeshat, etc. We will take later, okay? Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.